This was a total shock because they were actually bringing people to physically take our desks, take our computers, and remain on site.
No, they were not skilled labor at all. If these people that came in were geniuses, I would not be even bringing this up to anybody.
Lots of businesses are bringing in H-1Bs, not because they can't find American workers, but because the H-1B workers are both cheaper and they're indentured.
So the end game of this business model is to offshore all the jobs overseas so that they can pay $6,000 to $12,000 a year for a job you're paying $60,000 to $80,000 a year in the U.S.
Orlando, Florida, with its warm weather and popular theme parks, is the most visited destination in the U.S. For most children and many adults, it's a magical place. That was how Dina Moore felt about living in Orlando and working at Disney in the point-of-sale office. But after working for the company more than 10 years, she and 15 other employees in her department were told there was a reorganization and they would no longer have jobs.
It was very quick and sweet. It was, in 90 days, you're going to be let go.
Dina was devastated when she found out she was losing her job, but then she got another shock. She says she learned that lower-paid foreign workers were coming in and taking over the jobs.
They said that we were being outsourced, and we had 30 days to train our replacements, that they would be on site within 3 days. And then for the next 30 days, we were going to be shadowed. And then the last 30 days, we were the observers while people sat in our chairs and did our job. People got sick from the stress. A couple of my friends were hospitalized. One of my friends died simply because, and you knew he wouldn't have been in that situation. My friend wouldn't have a heart condition had this not happened. And those are lifelong things that you carry with you now that have scarred your soul.
Those replacing Dina and her co-workers are in the U.S. on H-1B visas. It's a program Congress set up in 1990 as a temporary, non-immigration worker program to help American companies. It allowed them to hire foreigners with specialized skills when they couldn't find American workers for the job. At least that was the original thinking. But the program has been abused. Each year, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services offers 65,000 H-1B visas and 20,000 student visas through a lottery system. The visas allow workers to stay in the U.S. for 3 years, but can be renewed. The U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services receives nearly twice as many applications as the cap provides, and the visas are usually taken within a few days. Since the H-1B visa program started, critics say jobs at companies such as Abbott Labs, IBM, Disney, Toys R Us, and Pfizer are or were outsourced to large global consulting firms, mostly from India and China. These firms, in turn, apply for most of the visas, bringing in cheap, lower-skilled labor, taking away American jobs, and eventually offshoring the work. Ron Hura is an associate professor of public policy at Howard University and author of Outsourcing America, which examines the economic and policy implications of offshoring highly skilled jobs.
So out of the 85,000, more than half of the visas now go to these firms that are bringing in workers because they're cheaper and they're also tied to the employer. And what they do is they'll go to a company and they'll say, look, you've got 300 people or 500 people working in IT. We can do those jobs cheaper. We can bring in cheaper workers, and if you outsource the job to those that work, your IT department basically, to us, we'll do it a lot cheaper. We'll save you money and we'll make a lot of profit off it.
Sarah Blackwell represents workers who have been replaced by H-1B foreign workers. She says there's a clear-cut business model for companies that use the H-1B visas.
Usually there is a new CIO that comes in, wants to innovate, talks some really great talk about changes in the company, and then the American company contracts with an Indian-based company.
Okay, thank you for calling.
So the Americans are told that they're being terminated in 90 days, which has to do with the H-1B visa. They're being terminated in 90 days, but during those 90 days, they're going to train foreigners to do their job. The next day, all of these foreigners are brought in, and the Americans are told, you get a severance if you stay for the 90 days and if you successfully train the foreigners. And if you don't, then you're fired and you don't get your severance. Once the American trains the foreigners, which sit at their desk and take over their work, and also it's being recorded on the computer, and there are people in India and Mexico and Philippines, wherever the people are, so they're training people overseas and training people in their chair. After the 90 days, all of the Americans are fired. What happens next is the foreigners continue to train the people overseas until the jobs can be eliminated completely out of the U.S. The end game is to eliminate the jobs and send all the work overseas.
Wow, you're so good at that.
That's what Leo Pereiro, who also worked at Disney, says happened to him.
I get this meeting invitation. When I walked into this room in this meeting, there was about 24 people there. And these people were all high achievers. They were all experienced, all people that had great reputations. We were told that we had 90 days to train our foreign replacements that were coming in. And if we didn't do it, we wouldn't be eligible to receive our severance and bonuses that were being given to us.
According to Blackwell, the outsourcing business model is designed to give the impression that other jobs will be available for American workers.
One of the other things that the American company does is say, stay, apply. We're going to have other job openings that you're going to qualify to do and apply for them, which they do. The Americans apply for them. They don't exist. It's just a trick to keep them there, to motivate them to continue to train.
Supposedly there were going to be jobs opening up, and I did apply. In the course of 6 to 9 months, I applied for 150 jobs at Disney.
We were also told during this meeting that there were new, more exciting jobs that were going to be created. So we were optimistic and hopeful that something would work out well in that sense.
Dina says she was offered a contract, part-time position at significantly lower pay than her previous job, but declined it since she says she no longer had faith in the company. To the contrary, contacted Disney's communications department. It says Ms. Moore was offered a position at comparable pay and turned it down. Disney also says the company hired a third-party vendor and had no role in selecting that vendor's employees. Since that time, Disney says it has placed more than 100 workers affected by the reorganization back into jobs at Disney. In hindsight, Disney says, quote, it wishes it had not asked people to help in the transition of work to the outside vendor. While this is a common and legal practice, people expect more from Disney, and it regrets falling short. Although federal law requires global companies employing large numbers of H-1B workers to sign a declaration saying they will not displace Americans, there is a loophole. An exemption cancels that requirement if employers pay H-1B workers at least $60,000 per year, which is significantly less than an experienced IT worker earns.
The reality is because there are loopholes in the way the laws were written, and they were purposely written that way, the companies are instead able to bring in people with ordinary skills that are already available widely here, and pay them a lot lower wages and keep them indentured. And so it's extraordinarily profitable to bring in a guest worker instead of hiring an American. And it's extraordinarily profitable to replace an American with one of these H-1B guest workers.
Outsourcing and using H-1B visas to replace American workers isn't just happening in the corporate world. It's starting to spread into medical and educational institutions.
To order the meeting of the UC Board of Regents today.
At a recent University of California, San Francisco Regents meeting, workers and representatives spoke up to the board about layoffs of IT workers. They say they are being replaced with workers from an Indian staffing company.
People in the United States are sick and tired of us losing our decent jobs. We're not going to participate in a race to the bottom where working people are fighting each other all across the world to see who can be exploited the most. I urge you to take leadership and stop this outrageous outsourcing. It's going to save you a couple pennies for massive political cost, for massive financial cost in the long run, and massive security cost. This makes absolutely no sense.
Hank Nguyen is a systems administrator who lost his job after 6 years. He told the Regents Board how he learned of his loss of the job.
Last July, I got 2 notices from UC. One is the bill for my daughter to go to UC Santa Cruz for $35,000, and the other notice is layoff notice. And my daughter asked me, can I go that, or should I continue my education? I could not. I did not know how to respond to that.
This is the third time Hank has lost his job to outsourcing. He says he's having a hard time finding a new job because he's over 40. University of California, San Francisco president is former Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano. During hearings on oversight of the Department of Homeland Security, she expressed a different view of outsourcing jobs to H-1B visa holders.
We feel, I hope you share, that our first obligation is to American workers and to encourage, if not hold accountable, those firms that are looking to fill spots to first turn to the talent pool in America, and particularly those who've lost a job. Do you have any opinions on the H-1B visa program?
Yes, Senator. First, I agree with you. Our top obligation are to American workers, making sure American workers have jobs. From an enforcement standpoint, my priority is to make sure that there's not fraud occurring within the H-1B program at all. Now, over the last months, we've added some tools. We've added fraud prevention tactics. We've begun looking at other more standard fraud investigatory techniques that weren't being used in H-1B that we are now going to employ, including things like site visits and work site visits. We're going to keep at this to make sure that the intent of that program is fulfilled.
At least 8 lawmakers, including Senator Dianne Feinstein, Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, and Representative Zoe Lofgren, have written to UC President Napolitano opposing the outsourcing of the university's jobs.
What they're doing there violates the intent of the H-1B law, and that we expect public institutions to live up to the law and to the intent of the law. So it's very disappointing what they've done.
To the contrary, contacted the University of California at San Francisco, which in turn issued a statement. It says in part, faced with increased demand for information technology and escalating costs, UCSF has entered into contracts with outside vendors for specified IT services. This move will save the university more than $30 million over 5 years, while enabling increased IT capacity and improved cybersecurity. The vast majority of UCSF's IT services will remain in-house. Security and privacy are integral to UCSF's outsourcing. As outsourcing expands into different sectors such as public institutions, finance, and medicine, many critics of the H-1B visas are concerned about breaches in security and privacy.
When we're putting all of our private data in the hands of India and Mexico and Philippines, we don't have their private data. It's not a two-way street. They can use that data if they want, whether it's a government or a person or a terrorist or Russia. I mean, anybody can use that data because they're not bound by our federal laws.
So I felt like a prostitute in a sense because I'm a very patriotic person, and I felt like I was betraying my country. I felt like I was betraying my company that I worked for, my family I could be turning my back on. It was such a hard decision. And to have somebody sitting next to you and repeat everything that you do and put that into a big manual, and then thinking of that manual being shipped to some other country.
Most critics of the visas don't blame foreigners, but the loopholes in the system.
Nobody gets up in the morning and says, today I'm going to steal somebody else's job. Or nobody gets up in the morning and says, today I'm going to drive down wages.
Aman Kapoor, founder of Immigration Voice, a nonprofit helping H-1B visa holders to secure green cards, says the visa loopholes not only cause companies to hire lower-wage workers, but allow some companies to take advantage of the foreign visa holders.
The worst abuses comes in the form of quality of life. When your life is controlled by your employer to an extent that you can't travel outside of your country, you can't even go to your parents' funeral, you can't change jobs, and you're sometimes even forced to work overtime 16 hours, but you will only be paid for 8 hours. In other cases, then companies will make you sign contracts either here, or they will make sign contracts outside of the jurisdiction in the home country by parents or grandparents, that if you leave an employer, your property would be confiscated, or if you leave your employer, you will have to pay 30,000 damages.
The abuse by global consulting firms in the H-1B visa program hasn't gone completely unnoticed. The Justice Department fined Infosys, an Indian-owned IT consulting company and one of the largest employers of H-1B visa holders, $34 million in 2013 for systemic fraud and abuse of the immigration process. But the loopholes in the law are not being closed either. The Labor Department's investigation at Southern California Edison for replacing workers ended with the consulting firm being cleared of all charges of discrimination and displacement of American workers. Despite the loss and offshoring of American jobs, many in technology companies argue there is an American worker shortage, that of workers with skills in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM jobs, and the cap on the visas should be lifted.
An infinite number of people coming who are taking jobs that pay over $100,000 a year. You know, they're going to pay taxes. We create lots of other jobs around those people. You know, my basic view is that the country should welcome as many of those people as we can get, because people with those great talents, particularly in engineering areas, the jobs are going to exist somewhere, and the jobs around them are going to be created wherever those uniquely talented people are. So even though it may not be realistic, I don't think there should be any limit. These people would not have difficulty getting into other rich countries. In fact, you know, countries like Canada and Australia have been beneficiaries of our system discouraging these people with both the limits and the long waits and what the process feels like as they go through the security checks.
New American Economy is an organization of political and business leaders who support immigration reforms that will help create jobs for Americans. Their website says, "For America to compete in the 21st century, we need a robust innovation economy, which requires a workforce skilled in the science, technology, engineering, and math fields. Yet, American students are not entering those industries in sufficient numbers, and the U.S. is projected to face a shortage of 1 million STEM workers by the year 2020. Our broken visa system makes it difficult for many of them to stay after graduation, a reality that hurts the ability of our employers to expand and create more opportunity for American workers." Others disagree.
I am completely opposed and appalled by the idea that we don't have enough qualified Americans. Number one, because I talk to several a day that are being fired and are training. I have never once heard an American person who's training, whether the person's in or outside the country, saying that the person's more qualified or even half as qualified as they are.
There's no broad-based shortage of American IT workers. We can look at all of the different labor market indicators, from employment levels to unemployment rates, and the most obvious one would be to look at wages, and wages have been flat for about 15 years ago or so. So there isn't any shortage.
Those training their replacements also say the trainees were not highly skilled.
Some of them had gotten Microsoft credentials. They had been just fresh out of college or studied for a Microsoft exam and had never been in a real world position, 2 of them.
If these people that came in were geniuses, I would not be even bringing this up to anybody, because I would really question, hey, would it be better for the country if I was replaced by somebody that was just phenomenal and amazing at what they did.
Members of Congress want President Trump to deliver on his campaign promises to reform the visa program. The Trump administration so far has temporarily halted the expedition of visas. In the meantime, bills are being introduced in Congress to stop the abuses, and one of those bills was written by Representative Lofgren, who represents Silicon Valley in California.
We're not going to get more H-1B visas. All my bill does is reform the current system so that the visas that exist are going to high-skilled people who are going to grow our economy, not to entry-level or run-of-the-mill people who are undercutting American wages. In the bill I've introduced, if you want to pay 200% more than the highest wage, then you get first crack at an H-1B visa for the person you're trying to hire, and then 150% of the highest wage and so forth. So what are we doing here?
Lofgren's bill adds protections against scamming and calls for the elimination of caps on permanent visas. Lofgren and others say having caps on green cards allow consulting firms, mainly from India and China, to bring in lower-skilled labor. The workers are then indebted to their employers and can't change jobs while they wait for their green cards.
We allocate visas that are supposed to be merit-based on your skills by where you're born. And so, for example, India, with a population of over 1 billion people, has the same number of visas as Iceland, with a population of 350,000.
Experts say there's a reason the vast majority of foreign workers come from India.
Raise your right hand.
There are quotas on how many people from each country can become citizens. For Indians, there's a 70-year wait. So employers know any foreign worker brought in from India will never become a U.S. citizen and will be essentially indentured to the company for life.
So now over the period, what has happened is backlog for people from India for green card has now mushroomed over into 1.5 million people. So now employers have more incentive to hire more people from India because they know that there's a green card backlog of 70 years. So once employers will hire people from India, those employees cannot change jobs for that many years.
There aren't any solid numbers on how many IT jobs have been taken by foreigners or outsourced, but Ron Hira estimates it is as many as 1.5 million. 2 of those jobs belong to Dina and Leo. They both left careers in technology as a result. Leo now works in his family's real estate business, and Dina works in 3 home-based businesses with her husband, Eric.
I have made the decision not to go back into IT, and I made that decision when I was keeping the tally by all the IT recruiters who called me, and when 75% of them are H-1B visa holders calling me because I asked, I decided it wasn't a world I was willing to go back to.
It's difficult to see how the Trump administration can change that a lot in terms of the outsourcing. What they can change is the extent to which jobs in America are filled by foreign workers. They've got great control over that.
Both Dina and Leo filed class action lawsuits against Disney, the first time Americans have gone to federal court to sue both outsourcing companies and American companies.
I don't want other people to go through what I went through. That is my goal. I cannot see this happen anymore. It is tearing families apart.
Their lawsuits were dismissed, but both sides agree something must be done to stop the flow of American jobs overseas.
You've got to get the salary criteria up so that H-1B visa cannot be used to undercut the salaries of American workers. But you've also got to do it so that it cannot be used to keep from hiring underrepresented Americans in the field.
You know, you can't rely on sort of moral suasion and shaming as a substitute for regulation and law. You have to fix the program because these CEOs are benefiting from this by cutting costs, by bringing in cheaper workers, and taking advantage of it. They're not villains. They're doing what they're paid to do, right, which is maximize profits. The government has to go in and fix these things.
Everyone agrees, since the visas are a creation of the government, it's the government that needs to go in and fix these abuses. Thanks for watching. I'm Bonnie Urbay. Please join us next week on To the Contrary.